Noting the hour in the presence of quorum, I call this Finance Committee meeting to order. First up is citizens' comments. Please, if anyone has anything to say, share it now. Okay. Seeing none of that, we're going to move on to a presentation from Minuteman. Pam, come on up.
Good evening.
You can sit if you would like.
It's up to you.
And just push to the button if the little light's on, you know your microphone's working.
As far as changing the slides.
Just tell me when to switch it.
Okay, will do. Well, again, good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to present the Minuteman budget and assessment and some of the things that are going on. My name is Kevin Mahoney. I'm the interim superintendent director. I see a couple of familiar faces, actually, from when I was last here about 5 years ago. I'll be concluding my time at Minuteman June 30th, so I've been working here on an interim basis as we transition our superintendent director starting July 1. So with that, I'd like to just move on to the next slide and just talk about some of the things we think about when we're putting together our budget. We want to make sure our budgets do reflect our values and our priorities, and mindful about our students and faculty in trying to develop a budget that serves their needs in order to make our students successful. So with that, we just wanted to, on the next slide, offer a couple of comments about some highlights from students from the town of Acton. I know in previous town meetings where town meeting members have asked to give us some idea with how students are doing and what they're doing. And they've been very, very successful. As we noted in one of the bullets, Lara Saucier was our 2023 Outstanding Vocational Student of the Year. That's a very high achievement for her. We graduated 11 graduates last year, 8 of whom went on to 4-year college, stayed in their vocational technical fields in design and visual communication, multimedia engineering, environmental science, as well as engineering. 3 went on to work directly into the trades in welding, plumbing, and in carpentry. So, so we have all Acton students are represented in our 19 programs, and we have 13 students that are working co-op this year as well. So, and we've also noted a couple of athletic achievements in the soccer program and softball program as well. So just wanted to share that. On our next slide, we'll get into the numbers. And this is a breakdown of the assessment for Acton. It's broken down into the assessment categories that we use to calculate the assessment pursuant to the regional agreement. The required minimum contribution is defined by the state Chapter 70 formula, 1.6 million. That's up about 20.9% over last year. School choice is just a assessment based upon an Acton student in another school system. Transportation assessment is just the net amount of transportation costs being allocated by the assessment formula. And then assessments in excess of minimum, about just over $1 million to Acton. Our debt and capital assessment is $190,000 for a subtotal of $2.9 million is the proposed assessment. Also included, in addition to that, is $660,000, which is attributed to the debt service for the school building project, which Acton voters voted to exempt under a debt exclusion. So the total amount of the assessment is $3,600,903. That's up 9.6% over the current fiscal year. On the next slide, I'd just like to talk a little bit about our overall budget summary. So as you can see on this slide, our operating and capital recommendation, the total amount is $31,517,219. That's 3.96% above the current year budget. On the next slide, you'll see more of a breakdown of that, where our operating budget is 2.99% increase. Our capital recommendation of $1,660,000 is 34% higher. We'll talk more about that, obviously, as we get into it. It's one major item that's driving that. And the building project debt recommendation of 5.6 million is about 1.36% above FY24. Now that debt service is starting to kick in over the last number of years, it's based on a level debt schedule, so that will stabilize moving forward. So on the next slide, how does that translate to assessments? Well, in FY25 assessments of $25,689,923 is an increase of under 1%, 0.82%. There's some anomalies that's causing that. I'd like to go over those as well, just so that there's no expectation that that's some type of a trend. So in terms of our budgets line items on the next slide, some of the drivers that we took into consideration regarding our budget development was in the salary categories. Our collective bargaining agreement is in year 2 of a 3-year deal with a 3.5% increase plus step and lanes. We also reduced a couple of administrative positions as well. There were 3 positions that we funded out of grants during the COVID pandemic, and we're bringing those back. 2 of those are student-facing positions in our health tech aid and library aid, and our co-op coordinator position, which has seen a significant growth in the amount of students that are taking advantage of co-op. We did not fund an FY24 a foreign language teacher. We had a retirement last school year, and that teacher taught both language, French and Spanish. So we didn't think we'd need to fill that position, but the demand for Spanish existed when we started this school year, so we had to bring on a position in the for a foreign language teacher that we're continuing to maintain the funding, partially as a result of the increased enrollment. We're proposing an athletic trainer position. This is an investment in our athletic program. We have our participation level is quite high compared to prior years. And we also have mandates under the MIAA to be providing athletic training facilities. So we've incorporated that into this recommendation. On the next slide, you'll see some other items as far as in the non-salary areas. Transportation increase is pursuant to our bus transportation contract of 5%. And plus, we're adding an additional late bus as part of this budget proposal. We currently have late buses run on Tuesday and Thursday, and we're thinking that this would make some sense to have it run Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because with the 2 days, we're finding if students wants to stay for extra help and they want to participate in a club or an organization, they're limited because of the number of days that they can stay after. So by adding an additional bus, it'll give students more opportunities to participate in some of those after-school programs that they otherwise could not because of limitations to transportation. Utilities, we just budgeted based on FY23 actuals. We did level fund our health insurance only because in FY24, we were anticipating a 10% increase. And it did not materialize. It ended up being level funded. So in FY25, we're level funding that, expecting an 8% increase. Those rates haven't been set yet. They typically get set late in the spring. So we're level funding that. And we're investing in cybersecurity, just concerned about making sure that our systems are resilient and safe. On the next slide is a couple of other things that we just wanted to point out. On the capital stabilization, this is the driver that I was talking about earlier when we saw the significant increase in our capital. We've been typically funding over the last couple of years $500,000 towards our stabilization account. This year, the recommendation is $850,000. The idea, if we're able to fund at this level, it'll get our balance in the capital stabilization account up to $3 million. I'll talk about it a little bit more in detail, but basically we're trying to position ourselves to maximize the potential use of the campus and have that funding in place in the event we have an opportunity to partner with a potential company that be looking at an animal science vet center clinic on campus. We do have a building that's vacant that we will look to renovate for that purpose. A couple of years ago, we pursued that opportunity. It didn't materialize for a number of reasons, but one of which was that if Minuteman would participate in their share of the investment, we didn't have the funds available at the time. And the building wasn't planned to accommodate for a fully functioning animal science program. So what we're looking to do, when we have our bids out on the street right now to see if there are partners out there, I'll get into that a little bit more, but that's one of the reasons why there's a bump of 350 over fiscal '24. The other, in our debt service, there was a $1.9 million bond that was authorized after our building project was complete to allow us to move forward with our athletic fields. We had some surplus project funds from the building project and just needed a little more funding to get us able to complete the athletic fields in our member towns. We're supportive of that. But part of that plan was that we were going to rent those facilities and pay for that debt service out of the revenue generated from the rental income. And as such, the debt service kicked in, and for the first year was fiscal '24. We were unable to offset that debt service in fiscal '24 because the fields hadn't quite come online yet, and we couldn't support the payment. But in fiscal '25, we do have sufficient revenue that we've been generating on a consistent basis, and we'll be offsetting the debt service in fiscal '25. And then our contribution to OPEB will be about $315,000. So as we take a look at this chart in our enrollment, you'll see that we have a total of 686 students. You can see how it's trended upwards. When you look at the red line, we have 649 in-district students, which has climbed consistently over the last 6 years, as more and more awareness of opportunities that may exist in vocational technical education, as well as, I think, the attraction of the new school with some additional programming may have contributed to that. As such, given that the school was designed for 628 students, we're currently in excess of capacity. We're making it work. We're reconfiguring space that, in a way that we can, that's conducive to learning, but it was designed for other type of space. So we're still trying to manage that growth. But what we're seeing is, as you see the red line growth of in-district students, you're seeing a decline in the non-member towns. We only have 37 students from non-member towns, and they're upperclassmen that will be working their way through the system. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit more detail on that, the breakdown of the student enrollment by town and by class. And it gives you a little bit further delineation of the 649 students that are currently enrolled, with students, 94 students from Acton, which would be the second largest sender of the district, which is a shift from about 5 years ago. We were seeing, I think, 40, 45 students, and that's nearly doubled. So the interest level in Acton has skyrocketed over the last 5 years. So on the next slide, as we see these shifts in enrollment, what it does highlight is that as most of our students are in district, that means that the out-of-district revenue that we would receive from those non-member school district will decrease. They pay a tuition, they pay a capital fee, they pay a special education fee. And to the extent that we're seeing that revenue go down, that means that the shift in the revenue will be with the member towns. So it's just something that, on the next slide, it gets a little bit more into the details as far as how we're seeing that decline in revenue over the next few years. But I want to put that out as sort of an early warning notice that because of that trend, that will shift most of the costs to the member towns. We just wanted to note that. We may, with this year, we may be accepting some non-member towns. We'll see how the enrollment goes. There's some other compelling headwinds that we've been dealing with as far as our admissions this year, but we're optimistic that we should have a pretty strong year, but there may be openings for out-of-district students. On the next slide, it's a lot of, the next slide is just talks about the preliminary assessments. Move that one, please. A lot of numbers, but I think the point here that I'd like to make about this is that when we look at our member towns, the assessments from the FY25 preliminary assessment compared to the FY24 assessment, it gives the change in the dollar amount by community. And as you can see on the bottom line, it's a 0.82% overall. And you'll see in 3 of the member towns, they're actually experiencing a decrease from this fiscal year. But on the right-hand side, the right 3 columns represents the change in the 4-year rolling average, which is a major driver in the formula to calculate that assessment. And as you can see on the top line with Acton, there's a 9.62% increase in the assessment. But when you look at the 4-year rolling average, it's a change of about 21%. So as we're seeing that rapid increase in student enrollment over the last 4 years, it took some time for that 4-year rolling average to catch up to that, to a point where it's intended to smooth things out so that you don't see those spikes year in and year out. But with the growth that we've seen in Acton, that's what's causing some of that. And the next slide looks at that a little more closely with Acton, where we could see over the last 4 years that the total assessment has changed double digits, going back to FY22, 26%, 29%, 15%, and now we're before you at 9.6. And, we're seeing the change in enrollment increases. one of the things I can mention about this is that, and we've been working closely with the town manager is giving updates on where we are as far as with our budget process and where we see our projections going. And our most recent projection would suggest that if we start to see freshman enrollment at about 22 students a year over the next couple of years, that will sort of stabilize the increases as far as the 4-year rolling average. We do have a slot allocation formula, and of that slot allocation formula, I mentioned 22 because that's what Acton would be. It's not a hard cap. In other words, if there's capacity with some of our other member towns where they don't fill all of their slots, and Acton has 22 that are already committed, but there's additional students from Acton, they could, in fact, pick up one of those slots from the other member towns. But just in trying to give a projection, if we're starting to see some of that enrollment plateau over the next few years, that should provide a more predictable type of change in the assessment than what you've obviously experienced here over the last few years. So,
Kevin, do you mind if I jump in for a
Not at
second?
all.
And hi, I'm Pam Nurse, the Acton rep on the Minuteman School Committee. I think another piece of this, and forgive me if you're about to get to it, is that one of the, we've been leveling off the total enrollment goal at Minuteman, where you may remember, like a year or two ago, we were saying, we were shooting for 800. We've been looking at that, bringing that down so that those enrollment changes, won't be as drastic as if we were still shooting for that higher number.
yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we are in excess of the building capacity. We think maybe the manageable number would be somewhere around 650 to 660. But as Pam mentioned, we are going to be capping our acceptance letters, class sizes on day one to somewhere around 175 freshmen, and based on that and the slot allocation formula, that's where the 22 student number comes in for Acton. So rather than trying to take as many students as we can and bring them in, we're going to try and manage this moving forward. It just creates a lot of problems finding the space needs for these, for the classroom space in particular for the students. So on the next slide, when we talk about other future assessment impacts, I just wanted to point out when we're at 0.82% overall, I just wanted to point out some of the anomalies to that. One of the things that that occurred when we were working on the FY24 budget last year is our timeline to get our budget out is late January, and typically we try and have our public hearing right around the same week or the week after the governor brings forward her budget recommendation. But in an election year with a new governor, they get a little extra time. So we didn't have the benefit of that for fiscal '24. And as it turned out, our estimate for Chapter 70 state aid was $781,000 less than we actually realized at the end of the budget process. So in effect, what happened is that we anticipated lowest Chapter 70 money, which increased the other assessment categories, and then ultimately realized the $781,000. I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little bit more in detail on the next slide, but the point here is that as we manage our Chapter 70, we manage our enrollment, we should see a little bit more consistency in that category, because you're going to see, as we talk about it a little further, that it is skewed because of the budget process, the budgeting model that we developed last year. The other thing that's going to impact the assessments, as we talked about a little bit more, is the decline in the out-of-district tuition and the capital fee revenue. That change in revenue will shift that burden to member towns. And then finally, as I talked about earlier, just by picking up the athletic field debt service, that also decreased our assessments this year. So those are some of the things that are reflected in this budget, which made that assessment of 0.82 being so low, and given some of the things we're looking to implement. But as we look at the next slide, this is the discussion where when we look at the left-hand side, the Chapter 70 estimate was about $2.2 million. The actual governor's final budget came in at closer to $3 million, which left a difference of $781,000 that we effectively realized realized in our Chapter 70 number in excess of what we expected. There was some discussion last spring about some of the member towns were looking for some type of a rebate on that. I think there may have been correspondence from Minuteman that said that once the FY24 budget process was settled, that there would be a rebate on that. So what we took a look at it and tried to figure out if there was a way that we could best use that would benefit both Minuteman and the member towns in total. So on the next slide, we met with the town managers and the town administrators from all of our member towns to talk about our MSBA project. And it's been a long process on the MSBA project. We're now awaiting our turn to close it out once and for all. We've been carrying some short-term bond anticipation notes in anticipation of our final grant payment. And once we get that final grant payment, we want to be done. But we do recognize that our outstanding balance is about $2.8 million. Our expected reimbursement from MSBA is closer to $2,235,000. So there is an amount that would need to be financed once it's finally closed out, whether it's late summer or fall, of about $565,000. And the plan was that we would finance that over the next 3 or 4 years, just to be done with it. And that would be raised in 7 of our 9 towns, again, exempt from the tax levy. So when talking about this with the town managers and the town administrators, we proposed that why don't we, instead of rebating that $781,000, why don't we offer relief to the taxpayers by just applying that payment to that principal of $565,000, plus there'd be interest of another $50,000 or so. So that we would just close out the just close out the balance in June. It would just save $145,000 in interest, not to mention issuance expenses in raising and in carrying this just additional small piece of debt. And that was received unanimously by the town managers. So that's the basis that we've been working on. So rather than issuing refunds to member towns, that you'd get the benefit of that in your free cash 2 years from now, this would save Minuteman from having to do any additional borrowing and reduce interest costs. So that's the way we went with that excess. Any questions on that piece? Okay, so I think on the next slide, I just wanted to elaborate a little bit further on the need for the additional funding for the $350,000. Again, I mentioned we do have this unoccupied building on campus that we've used in the past for a daycare center, a private elementary school, Bright Horizons Center, It's now vacant. And we estimate that in order for us to build an animal science for-profit clinic, as well as a lab for student space and classroom, it would probably be about $7 million, counting on, furnishings and equipment, to renovate 6,000 square feet. We have issued a statement of interest, request for proposals that's currently out there now, where we seek a partner to participate with us and invest 50% for the build-out, and then some type of a payback through a lease arrangement working forward in order to partner in our animal science program, give our students opportunities to work in a real work environment in a veterinary center, maybe provide opportunities to our partner and to our students for a trained workforce upon graduation, and allow our students that real-world opportunity. So we're out there seeking that partnership. We had the Animal Science Center in the main building, which we carved out space in the horticulture area, and it just wasn't working. So we do have residential homes that we own that are on the back of the campus, and we're using one of those homes as temporary space for the animal science program. In fact, they moved in yesterday over the February break. It's adequate. It frees up some shop space and it frees up some class space that we desperately need in the main building, but it's not sustainable moving forward, and I'd be concerned about the program losing interest, and that would be unfortunate. So we're trying to position ourselves with this funding to engage in this type of a partnership. So I think that there may be other grant funding that we'd be pursuing as well with this. But I do want to emphasize that this would not increase seating capacity at the school. This is just basically to try and create a program that would be an additional enhancement to the school, but it would not increase capacity, which is the other incentive why I think it's in our best interest to try and fund this through our capital stabilization program. Any question on that? Okay, so just kind of wrap up, I guess, on the next couple of slides, this is just a breakdown of our change in our operating and capital budgets. The operating budget, a net change of just under 3%. The capital equipment, lease and athletic fields, an increase of 34.1%, but the difference of $422,000, that main driver is that $350,000 that we just talked about. The project debt service up 1.36%, and as mentioned, should start to stabilize moving forward over the next number of years. So the total operating capital budget is up 3.96%. On the next page, on the next slide, you'll see, and I'd like to point out the anomaly I was talking about earlier on the Chapter 78. You'll see that we're budgeted $2,998,000 in fiscal '25. We budgeted only $2,197,000. That number would have actually been a little closer to 2.9 had we had the benefit of the actual number this fiscal year. So even though it's a difference about $800,000, as I explained earlier, $781,000 we actually did get. So when we see a 36% increase, that's really not representative of what's happened. We see on the revenue, we see an increase in our regional transportation reimbursement as a result of the increase in service costs there. On our prior year non-resident capital fee, we see a decrease as we will over the next 3 years. And on our facility rental revolving revenue, we're showing the $113,000 for the debt service for the athletic fields. which, again, moving forward, once that's incorporated year after year, won't have an impact on assessments. So the net, the member assessment increase is up 0.82%. Had we budgeted the Chapter 70, if we adjusted the Chapter 70A to what it would have been, what it actually came in, the assessments would have probably been somewhere around 3.4, 3.5%. And then just the final slide again, the required minimum contribution, up 880,000, again, 9%, driven primarily by the, under the state Chapter 70 formula and enrollment. The transportation budget is up 11%. We noted that extra day as part of the, contributing to that, as well as the increase in the, the contract itself. Our ESCO lease, that's an energy saving program we did back in the old building a number of years ago and financed that lease out over, I believe it was 15 years. FY25 is the last year for that lease. So that will go away. We're hoping to be able to apply some of that funding, maybe $300,000 a year or so, towards our OPEB, to try and address the OPEB liability, because we've been lagging in that area. We've been making efforts, but not to the level that we should be. Again, the capital lease of 43.46%, we talked about a little bit before with the 350,000. I think that summarizes my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, who's up? Jason?
You know I have questions. Oh, Steve, you go first.
Hi, Kevin. Nice to see you again
Good to
after all
see you,
these years.
Steve.
So, quick maths, your basic operating and capital budget is going up a little less than 4%, and our assessment's going up for 9.6, and so the difference is our increase in enrollment based on the 4-year average.
Yes, that's really what it boils down to. Yes.
And what's your cost per pupil these days?
For assessments, it's about 38,000 on the assessments, and that includes our capital as well. That's all in.
Okay, and how does that compare to other vocational schools? in the
We're
state?
high, no question. We've been.
How high is high, Kevin?
We've been number one. We've been there a number of years. There's 3 major drivers to that. The first driver is our teacher salaries are on the high side. We compete with our other member district school systems that are also, many of whom pay on the high end as well. The other variable on our salaries is our vocational teachers that we often take from either trade or unions or industry, where their compensation is typically higher than what a teacher's salary would be, so that drives it up as well. So when we compare where we are relative to our teachers' salaries, I think when I looked at our member towns, we were 3rd highest among our member towns. When you look at vocational schools overall, we were 3rd or 4th highest on our teacher's salary. So that's a driver. The other driver is our transportation costs. We pay considerably more than some of the other local vocational school districts, I think primarily because of our geographic location. When you look at Neshoba Tech, when you look at Assabet, when you look at Shawsheen, you see that their actual location is centered within the district, whereas when you look at our district, we just go east-west. I mean, we're on almost the furthest most point east, so our bus contracts tend to be higher. They've always been that way. So our transportation costs are higher. The other contributor is We have a high number of students that require special education services. We have 40% of our students that require special education services. They thrive at Minuteman. They do very well. They're very successful. We're very proud of what we do with the students. But as a result of that, we also allocate a high percentage of our operating budget, higher than comparable schools, towards supporting those special education services and the staffing that's necessary for it. So I would say those are the three main drivers of our high per pupil cost.
Thank you.
First, I'd like to say that it's a testament to the new school building and to the education that you offer that the enrollment has gone up as precipitously as it has for the Acton students. On the one hand, I think all the member towns should be very proud of the new school building. On the other hand, dear God, when are we going to be done with this new school building and all the bonds and bands? I'm glad to hear that this last band might finally be the end of it. How many rounds of bonds did you end up taking out? 7?
Well, not quite 7. It was 1, 2, 5, and we're paying off this 6th piece, so.
So that'd be the 6th, so I was close.
You're pretty close.
Okay. I have to admit, I'm a little confused by the statement that the school is supposed to be populated, max capacity is 628, you're at 690, yet you're still considering having out-of-district kids in next year. How does that work? If we're already overpopulated, why are you looking to bring in
Because
kids out of district?
Yeah, what we're doing is we're managing our freshman classes coming in now. So what we were seeing is we were seeing freshman classes that were really kind of spiked, and we were making it work because we had smaller classes in a senior year. And all of a sudden, you take in a high freshman class and you drop off a low senior class, and then you take in another high freshman class, and it just, over time, it just ramps up. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to limit the number of freshmen to 175 a year. And the reason that I suggested that they may be out-of-district students is we've hit a number of headwinds as far as our admissions process this year. Arlington High School is coming online this year. We know anecdotally that there will be more students from Arlington that will stay at their local high school because of the new project. That's just the way it works. We've heard that at our open houses. Quite frankly, Minuteman has not had some very good publicity over the last year. And I think parents of 8th graders may take a look at that and say, geez, I'm not sure. We have to get beyond that. We think we can. But that's been a real concern in our admissions process. We've also had some administrative hiccups with our software for our admissions. We've been able to overcome it, but it too is just, if there's a parent that's on the fence and gets frustrated filling out an online application, they just may say, well, forget it. So we've had some of that. And so we're seeing our numbers a little bit lower. So we'll be sending out the first round of acceptances on March 1st, and we'll see what comes back. And if there's space available, we may offer it to non-member towns. But the idea is to stay right around that 175 number.
So 175 for a four-year class is 700. That's still 72 higher than your largest expected, anticipated main size. So why not, through attrition, allow the total population to come back down closer to what the school can handle? And I ask for 2 reasons. One, is it not true that because I believe it was the case, and I'm curious if it's changed, is it not true that the capital fee charged to out-of-district towns is less than the equivalent would be if a town had stayed in the district?
Depending on what town they are from. If it's coming from a town that offers, we have 2 types of towns. It's a type A town and a type B town.
I think 5.
5 programs is the limit, and if you if you're coming from a town that already has an offering of 5 or more vocational technical programs, you will pay the equivalent of amount as a member town student. If you come from a town that has less than 5 vocational technical programs that student can choose, you get a 25% discount on that. That's under state regulation.
And again, that's a slap in the face to those of us, those towns that decided to stay in the district. And therefore, I strongly recommend that you make sure to reserve space for in-district towns and not try and fill a short-term gap with out-of-district placements, especially if you're already oversubscribed. Another way of looking at this $3.5 million stabilization fund is another way of trying to, after the fact, right-size a school that was built too small to begin with. Those of us that remember this, remember that the school was built to a certain number because the MSB would not build anything smaller. And I remember the ringing of the wrists at the time saying, oh, we're never going to fill the school. Many people on this sitting right here today said, yes, you will, and you'll be oversubscribed from the beginning, which is exactly what's happened. Last year, a couple of us in this room met with the previous superintendent with a plan to try and add a new wing. Please, stop. You've got a great product. It was built from the wrong size from the start. That's unfortunate. We all regret that we were backed into that by the decisions of other towns and the departure from a much larger school district. But please, we can't do this. We can't handle this. You're absolutely right. We are all aware of the 20% plus increases for the last 4 years to the town of Acton. Do not look for more ways of growing. I appreciate the fact that you said that this new veterinary school will not increase capacity, but you already have. It was a 628 student building. You're pushing 700 now, and you're looking for another building to fill the spots that you've already oversubscribed. Please, slow down. Stop the growing. It shouldn't take 6 rounds of bonds to begin with, and you're still adding, and we can't support this.
I appreciate your comments. I think we're closer to an agreement than you might be thinking. I may have miscommunicated my comments. First of all, on the 175 number, we see through natural attrition that as the sophomores, juniors, seniors, for whatever reason, the parents move, the kids drop out, whatever the reason is, that we're going to be, and it's going to vary, but it's going to be somewhere around 650 to 660 as we see that go, and we'll adjust that year over year. The comment I made about the non-member town students is only to backfill any number that comes in less than that 175. There are slots that are available for member towns, and they get first priority at that. I want to emphasize that first and foremost. The only time that out-of-district students will get in is if there are seats available only. So I remember those days clearly as well. And so I do think we're much closer in line than I may have represented, so I want to make sure I'm being very clear.
You could also just not add in that first year until you see what the attrition actually is. So rather than living at that 690 number, you could go back down closer to 630 right from the start and not bring in out-of-district towns. When, at your current rate, when do you anticipate OPEB to be fully funded?
We have a long way to go on OPEB. Right now, our unfunded liability for OPEB is about $23.7 million, and our current OPEB trust fund balance is about $869,000. So we've been lagging there. We hope to be able to increase funding when that ESCO project drops off. In the last FY23 and FY24, we budgeted FY23, $725,000, FY24, $762,000. This year in FY25, $800,000. And over the next FY26, ramping that up to $1,155,000, FY27, $1,215,000, and FY28, $1,275,000. The school committee had a OPEB study committee take a look at this and made a funding recommendation of 5% each year and additional $10,000 or there was an additional allocation of funds for any new employees beyond over and above the 5% increase. So I don't have the projection on when that would pay off, but we certainly have a long way to go.
Might be good use instead of a stabilization fund. Lastly, I am very happy to see that the athletic fields are indeed going to have started to become self-sustaining. I'd like to encourage that. And as for the veterinary school, maybe you need to have an agreement in place before you put any more money into a stabilization fund. Maybe you need to get the agreement in place first and then come back to the towns asking to build out that veterinary program rather than putting that money into a stabilization fund in the expectation of doing something, because we're strapped. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, how many students from Acton applied this year?
22.
22 applied? And we have 22 slots, roughly.
I just checked that today because the deadline was last week, yeah.
My son was one of them that applied. And we did the tour and everything. I was very impressed. And I did the tour the first time when you were building the building. Then see it in its finished state is a totally different experience, so to speak. So it was very good to see that and talk to the different teachers and
Great.
get an insight of what he would look at. And I remember there was somebody at town meeting that complained last year that it cost too much. Then one of the seniors got up and says, how much does it cost to have a plumber or electrician walk through your door? She was at $75 and more like $150, and they haven't done anything yet. So we need those tradespeople too to keep life working as we know it. And as electrification happens more and more, those skills are going to be more and more need. So, thank you.
First of all, thank you for your candor. I appreciate your honesty on even tough questions like your relative cost to other regional vocational technical high schools. But that raises a question. One of the slides that you presented showed your out-of-district students going down. Were those, for example, students from Boxborough or Sudbury or towns that were in the district before they pulled out in 2016? Because it looked like that slide went back to 2014.
Yes, I may have that breakdown.
Yeah, that's the one.
There were, yes, there were 12 from former member towns. They're all upperclassmen now, but there were some that were continued to, as we talked about earlier, we didn't necessarily have a cap on the number of students we took in. And so that, as a result, you see those students. This policy, I think, was only adopted this past fall by the school committee to cap it at 175.
Okay.
So.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, we will take a comment from one of our select board members.
Thank you so much. Alyssa Nickel, I am a member of the Acton Select Board. I just had a couple of questions. I noticed on one of the charts that Lancaster and Arlington, their four-year rolling average decreased for increased for FY '25, but I saw a decrease in the assessment. I think it was 4% for Arlington and 10% for Lancaster. And so I'm just wondering why that went down instead of going up if their rolling average went up from last fiscal year.
The rolling average in the case of Lancaster only went up 1.4%. So their assessment did in fact go down by 10%. So even though it went up, that didn't necessarily correlate with.
Is it a
That didn't
smaller number
necessarily-
of
it's a smaller-
students? Okay.
Yep.
Because I noticed that there's a different percentage of students from various towns. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. And I just have a question about the capital stabilization.
Yes.
On the slide, it said there was an increase to maintain potential use of the campus. And I don't understand that. What are we're keeping a potential for what? That seems like a significant expense for
It's,
potential.
well, because right now we don't have a partner for our animal science program. We're out on the street with a request of interest. But as I said here today, we don't have any firm interest from anybody about engaging in the partnership. What we did learn from the last experience when we did have interest was we didn't have enough funds available to engage in a partnership. So what we're trying to do is, over the last few years, is contribute to the capital stabilization fund so that if we do have a partner that comes in and can add a lot of value and benefit to a program that we're not really providing what we say we're providing, it'll give us that opportunity to not have to go back to the member towns and say, we need more money. You're not going to get any more seats, but we need more money. The fact is, the animal science program was not designed into the building, but we're currently offering it, and it's in its third year now.
Thanks so much, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Did that do it?
I appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it. It's nice to see you.
Next up, we're going to discuss the override and the current budgets. At last night's select board meeting, they voted to put forward on the ballot the $6.6 million that had come, we had recommended and came to consensus in ALG. That leaves $1.4 million in untaxed levy capacity above the most recent budget numbers from the town and the school. The town decreased from the previous number we saw, an additional $229,000. And school after budget, Saturday brought their budget down 1.06 million, which decreased our assessment by 884,000.
I have more information on that.
Oh, please go ahead.
I'll let you finish on the town side before I go jump in.
Well, I was just going to, my next point was going to be the tax impact from these changes. Is that, one second, I have the wrong window here. The proposed tax increase for next year would be $1,147. That is compared to the budget, B budget of $462. So they're coming in under the $1,200 that we had recommended as a sort of psychological target we were hoping would be more passable. Jason, did you want to add something?
Yeah, a little more detail on the school side. You're absolutely correct. At the end of school budget Saturday, which many of us were at, the school committee did give guidance to the superintendent and the administration to go back and come up with $1 million in savings. They came back to the next school committee meeting with the 1.065334 that you recommended, that you just mentioned. But at the last second, and I do truly mean at the last second for people who watched that meeting, 133,000 and change was brought back into the budget. So it's also important to remember that of that $1 million, 700,000 of it, 800,000 of it is savings of, anticipated savings from switching from HIT to Maya, and another 250,000 of it is a decrease in the OPEB contribution for the current year. So it was actually, the phrase that came to my mind when I was sitting in the audience there was that it was quite the magic trick to have $1 million in savings while still being able to add back a couple of FTEs, and then they added back a couple more FTEs at the last second with the addition of the reading assistants and keeping the certified librarians versus non-certified librarians. So the final number, the assessment to Acton is going to be $79,070,675, which represents a 10.33% increase. So on the one hand, I definitely want to say they did what we asked them to do. They reduced the assessment by not our assessment by $1 million, but the overall school budget by $1 million. But it's not lost on me that 800,000 of it was part of what they were saying was a reason for an override because of health insurance issues, but now they've got at least a partial solution to their health insurance issues. And I also stand by the statement that not paying your OPEB requirements, not paying your OPEB, not keeping up with that requirement is a form of kicking the can down the road. So while I am heartened that they did what we needed them to do, which is to smooth out the hit in next year's assessment to the individual tax, the average single-family tax bill, it is a little astounding that they were able to do so while adding back at least $200,000 worth of positions. And so I thought that was quite the magic trick. Again, full credit in reducing the bill, which is what we asked them to do. Is that about clear as mud, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to find the slides. Oop, wrong thing. But I'm not going to say anything until I see it. Sorry, this is the wrong thing. Who out of us had a chance to watch last night's select board meeting? My recollection is that there was a similar savings realized in the budget decrease for the town.
Yeah, and I also watched the end of the school committee, and what Jason says is accurate in that at the last minute, they did add back in some of the reading assistance, basically on the argument that it was the most cost-effective thing that they had. So the assistance didn't cost much, but had a huge impact. Last night, I was surprised. I think I was one of 12 people watching the selectmen's meeting on ActonTV, which was a surprisingly low number. I've seen much higher numbers, so I don't know if everybody was busy last night, but they may have missed it. But the town went through a similar kind of process, and I think I'm going to perhaps repeat what I said a couple meetings ago, but I think we've gotten to the point where we were hoping to get. We may not have gotten there the way we expected to a couple of weeks ago. I don't think anyone expected the hit issue to have been resolved in time for the fiscal year 2025. It took the superintendent changing his recommendation at the last minute from where he was headed. It took retirees and the school teachers union to basically buy into changing their health care, all of which are, in my 45 years of experience, remarkable to have pulled off under short duration. But I think everybody was making a sincere effort to try to take our guidance, our advice, and implement it with the least amount of damage to either on the school side, the student-facing part of what they provide, and on the town side, in terms of the actual services as well as the capital expenses that they were planning. So again, we may not have gotten there the way we thought or expected, but heck, we're there. We asked for some pretty aggressive goals, and I think they've been achieved. And I feel real comfortable echoing something that I think Jason said a couple weeks ago at our previous meeting, that if now is the time to support the override, I feel a heck of a lot more comfortable explaining it, how we got to this point, why this isn't a one-time fix, why this sets us up to be in a relatively better position a year from now than I would have predicted a month ago. So I think we've made some pretty amazing progress.
Anyone else want to add anything? Jason?
Do we want to get a sense of the committee about potentially trying to get to ALG consensus at the next meeting?
I was going to bring that up as I entered our next agenda item, which is ALG. Just to be clear, also the town has submitted, they have passed along the budget to us, so we need to have a budget meeting upcoming. A hearing, thank you. So that is something for us, but from my stance, both sides have done what we asked them for. It has hopefully gotten to a number that the voters can support, and it's up to the entities to convince people that this is what they want to do with their money at this point in time. So looking at ALG, I presume are still comfortable with the override number, given the, in spite of the underlying decrease in budgets. I don't think we want to open any sort of can of worms there, although I have some mild frustration that the underlying data can change and not change our consensus, but I'm going to let that go. So do we want to have any sort of consensus about the budgets for the next ALG meeting? Do we have any other?
Is that meeting Monday?
The meeting is on Monday, yes. Steve?
So where are we? I know what the override number is. The total budget increase required for FY25 is how much?
One second. The total budget for FY25, total?
Yeah.
Is $123,333,620.
So with the 6.56 override,
I'm going to, I think, answer your question a little backwards.
okay, good.
With the $6.6 million override, that leaves $1.4+ million of excess levy capacity.
Okay, that was my question.
Hold on. That uses $2.15 million of free cash. which is I think I have the math done here. The capital use in the budget is $1.025 million. And this is adding an additional $975,000 so that next year's taxes are lower than they would be. So to sort of smooth out the increase, with the idea that that money can be made back up in previous years, following years.
And so would that use of free cash take us below the 3%?
No, the idea is that we'll
Or-
only go to the 3%.
Okay.
That was one of our recommendations at the
Right.
last LG, was to take it to the floor in an attempt to smooth the tax bill in the coming year.
So I'm good with it.
The hope is that we can spread the increase out over a little more time that way and hopefully make it easier for people's budgets.
Yeah, and again, they took our advice at 3% for free cash. And the tradition has been 3 to 5%. So we are, in what I think is still a reasonable zone for free cash, but we're at the low end as a way of making sure that the transition to next year isn't bumpy.
That said, there is expectation of less turnback. And they did this based on Jason's recommendation
Thank you.
specifically. Yeah, kudos for that. Thank
It
you.
was, I had gotten the feedback from the committee that we cannot go and ask for a tax override if we have excess reserves in our coffers. And if our floor is 3%, we should be at the floor. So yes, the committee gave us the guidance, we fed it to ALG, and I'm very grateful that everyone agreed that being at the floor is the right place to be.
Well, then,
Was there any talk of using any of the stabilization funds that we have in town? Bring that to a vote to town meeting? Because to me, that's just sitting there, earning a little bit of interest, and it was designed to be able to use it for a rainy day for capital and things like that.
and we
Now
have one of those coming. We have our big DPW project coming.
Yeah, again, at what cost is that going to be? It's, last estimate was 35, what's going to be 40 next? I mean,
It's
it's,
good to have it, it's good to have it in our pocket for the rating.
Well, I
and the
mean, some of the
bonds.
things that I found out was, they're going to go and buy an electric pickup truck, and that's like $70,000, where you could buy a hybrid for 15 grand less, or 10 grand less. I mean, so buying something like that's a want, it's not a need. And I've been trying to hound them my opinion on that needs versus wants, and you're going to be doing that in a time where you're going to be raising taxes. The average tax bill of, what'd you just say, 1,147 for next year, and you're going to buy an electric truck that's really not necessary. Going on this electric kick that, and still keeping our old equipment, vehicles running and at less cost.
Would you like me to bring the town manager in to discuss that?
Yeah, I would,
Further.
because I got my response from him, but I look at it saying, how I found that out is I was at the styrofoam collection the other day, and one of the DPW workers was telling me about it. He's like, there's nothing wrong with this truck we're getting rid of. It was an Explorer. We use that for our parts truck. Why are we getting rid of it? Why are we buying an electric truck? And we don't have a facility here to charge it, so now that has to be added. So it's these little things that, we're going to get more grant money and stuff like that, but at what cost? And what's the real benefit? Where you have a vehicle that runs perfectly fine, you don't need to spend, you just spend a little bit of money maintaining it, instead of going out buying another vehicle and taking on that expense that money can be better used for something else.
Apologize, I was trying to find John's response to your email.
We have it.
Thank you.
It just seems wants versus needs.
Does that mean we do not want to reach a consensus on the town budget? Do you have further?
Well, he told me it was last year's budget that approved that, but whatever. No, I'm happy where it is right now. I just think that we need to be more stern.
Well, this raises a question I have, which I have not gotten an answer from the town, and I don't understand where the school falls on sustainability of the budgets. Ideally, you build up to needing an override, you get that up to a level that it's approved, that then lets you sustain for a certain amount of time. You sort of right-size your budget. Before the cut for Boxborough, the cut driven by Boxborough, the school said they were at a level where they were going to potentially have a negative budget increase next year because they got them through this cash flow issue. I have not heard where that falls after this most recent $1 million cut. And I haven't heard from the town projections on where we should expect to be. So I don't know how long to expect this override to last us for. We do have excess levy capacity built in, but at what point do we get sort of leveled out again at 3% for a while?
If I may say two things.
Yes, please.
First, not to be overly glib, Roland, but I don't know how to be any more stern than I've been this year. I really don't.
I'm not saying you specific, I'm saying the committee as a whole. I mean, I know you, Jason, quite well, so I agree with you.
And secondly, I do want to point out that in all future conversations with the citizens in town, let's make absolutely sure to educate the difference between the $6.6 million override and next year's taxes, and the fact that there is $1.4 million in unused tax levy capacity. And the whole purpose of that is not to just say that the following year they can just flat out use it anytime they want. It's all taken care of. Every budget has to go through the same process, has to go through LG, it has to be met and agreed to, but that we did agree that adding the authorization at this time seemed prudent so that we did not have this type of ALG, that we did not have this type of override fight in the near subsequent years. So I do want to stress to anyone who's listening, hopefully we get more than 12 people than the select board last night, but the override of 6.6 million has built into it an unused tax levy capacity. That unused tax levy capacity is not guaranteed to be used in the following year, although theoretically it could be. But any use of that unused tax levy capacity is going to have to go through the same rigorous process and hopefully the same set of stern people in the next ALG round.
Greg?
I think there is a new group of stern people we should include in next year's process.
No.
Please?
No.
No?
We are not discussing adding another town to our ALG process. I'm happy to fill you in. David?
So as far as the pickup trucks go, my understanding is we get them for $50,000, not $70,000. After that, we get a Green Communities grant on each, which brings them down to $35,000. And then we may get a federal incentives of $7,500 each, which brings it down to $27,500, is it? $27,500. So anyway.
Well, thank you. I appreciate not having to scroll and try to read that email while I'm up here. I think at this point, we've done a lot of the, oh, please, go ahead, Marianne.
This is just a general comment, but I think it's important to say at this point, is that this afternoon, we had a meeting with Standard & Poor regarding our bond rating. As you know, is that we're currently AAA, and the goal is to stay at AAA. So they do look at reserves, they look at stabilization, they look at us as a whole. So thank you all very much for giving us the direction and that we were able to stay within that direction, stay within the 3 to 5% that FinCom's ranges, so that we were able to have a good conversation with Standard & Poor's this afternoon.
Thank you. I think we've reached a good number, and part of how we convince, we do our part to help convince the public to vote for it is encouraging the entities to demonstrate how we're going to avoid being in this bind anytime soon. As we know, this came on especially quickly, unusually fast. Every previous override I've heard about has started at the previous year's town meeting. There's been a discussion saying, okay, next year this is going to happen. That's very much not the case this year. Go ahead, Steve.
Are you looking for a motion to Or sense of the committee, or just? No,
Sense of the committee.
Okay. Then.
What do you approve, Steve?
Plan.
Is anyone actively unhappy with the ALG plan as it currently stands?
So we are comfortable consensus-wise with the school budget, the town budget, and the use of free cash as described. Like I said, that brings us down to the floor.
Provided
And
there's no surprises between now and Monday.
yes, we will get the numbers I've given are ballpark based on the things said at the select board meeting. They're not finalized numbers in the plan. Okay, getting sense of the committee is that we are comfortable with these, and Jason and I can go in on Monday and support that. Okay, thank you very much. Public education. We do not have Christine here, and I have not gotten the most recent copy of the slides. Assuming we'll settle on those soon, do we have theories about how, or ideas about how to get this information in front of people? We are just presenting how the override works. Letting the other entities deal with convincing people that it is what they should vote for. Okay.
Yeah, the need for public education was driven home to me recently on Super Bowl Sunday of all days. We had a couple friends and neighbors over who we hadn't seen for a bit. They came through the door asking about the override and made the comment, why do we need to build a new replacement for the Conant School? And I went, excuse me? What? So there are some fundamental reasons why we need to present as much information as we can. Again, if there's only 12 people watching ActonTV, hopefully that would have given people some background into last night's meeting. There were more people watching the school committee meeting 2 weeks ago, but we were probably going to have several thousand people vote in the town election, and we have at most, I think, a couple hundred people who have been following these meetings. So as soon as we can finalize the budget, and I think we're close here, ALG, I think is the last step there. Boy, do we need public education.
Any idea how to do that?
I do.
Would you like to share it with the committee?
Sure. It turns out communication is what I teach. And one of the things that we are currently doing is the best we can with out of local newspaper. A new one apparently is going to arrive sometime early next month. The Acton Exchange. ActonTV is doing its bit, but that doesn't seem to be enough. So my guess is we're going to have to go old school. And old school may mean coffees. Old school may mean if there is a club in town, if there is an organization in town, we do need to provide objective, balanced presentation. I'm not looking to campaign. But if people don't understand the basics of the issue that they'll be voting on, what we will discover is we've gone through a lot of work over the last couple of months. And we're going to be back to square one the day after the town election. We will have learned a hard lesson in the lack of communication. So again, as soon as we can get a PowerPoint, fine. But I think it's also, we can't count on the message getting out there without us having to basically carry it as best we can. We don't need to invite ourselves to places, but we certainly need to be receptive to the invitation.
Well, and we are not being invited to places, so if anyone would like us, the League of Women Voters is actually setting up a group for that. My understanding is in the past, public informal committees have been formed to help educate people about this. So if anyone out there listening has done that and would like information from us. I'm sorry, Roland.
I wonder if it'd be beneficial for the committee to record something that goes on Acton TV. Because we did that when I was chair before one of the town meetings, when I was chair, and I had to give our point of view, what I was going to say at town meeting, and recorded it for Acton TV. I think that might be something that we should look into to do for something like this, to give the basics of.
Yeah, our slide deck right now is very much, this is how an override works. It's
Yeah.
not for or against, and I think that's something we can comfortably use public resources for. We'll clear that.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I don't know if we can express our opinion on that. I mean, we can't campaign for it, but,
Yeah,
we can still give our,
but we can sit
Basically.
here and campaign for it effectively. We can say,
Right.
I support it.
I was going to suggest that we either have it one of our scheduled meetings or pick another night and basically put the word out that we're going to give the presentation here for anyone who's interested in coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Acton TV stuff is great, but nobody watches it.
The trick there is that we are not in a position, nor should we be, to defend the budgets, the items on the budgets. If someone were to come in and say, why are you doing this?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, you've got a work in process from what I watched on your last meeting. And it's a good product, and logistically, it's easier for us to try and invite people here than to ask for invitations to go
Yes.
here and there. And there's lots of different people in town that have mailing lists that we could get that thing out there and say, hey, on this night, we're going to go through the mechanics of what an override is.
Yep. For the record, we've been doing our point of view for the last number of years, and every year we invite ourselves, we politely ask for an invitation to the PTOs and PTSOs, and that is very much so a hit or miss affair. For example, the joint junior high and high school hasn't really bothered to respond to us in the last 3 years, whereas some of the elementaries have. In fact, I remember one elementary school had 50 people in their PTSO meeting the night that we did it. So it's definitely hit or miss, and I'm more than happy for us, once we have a nice, clean, sanitized version of this document that we've run through the OCMP or whatever it is, then by all means, let's go and ask again if we can present to the different groups.
Alyssa, did you want to add something?
Thank you. I would love to share some ideas. At a previous meeting, you mentioned that in conversations with people, you can refer to a vote, right? At our February 27th meeting, we voted to support, approve, whatever. So you can share that with people face to face. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to share it in an Acton TV video. In addition, say that in addition to the process of how the override works. And, to Steve's point about, or maybe it was Jason, about people not showing up necessarily to a finance committee meeting, once the video is recorded, it's playing, it can be played again and again and again on Acton TV, and it can also be shared to social media, where a lot of people are right now getting misinformation, but they can get some accurate information. I also want to suggest that you explore what you're allowed to do with promotional materials, because I managed to get a copy of the trifold flyer that was prepared for the override in 2005, and the committee that was formed was Together for Acton, which is the same name as the current committee, Together for Acton, and there was a letter from the chair of the Finance Committee, as well as the chair of the Select Board. So I would just encourage you to do more to promote your position out in the public, beyond doing so at these meetings.
Thank you. Greg?
You know, I'm a big fan of ActonTV, however, the problem is people take a look and they say, oh, this meeting only ran 2.5 hours. And it's like, ugh, that's a little daunting. So part of what our communication challenge will be is people assume we've done our homework. What people are least asking when they come to my house is, can you net this out? Don't go on for 2.5 hours. Just give me the top line.
I think that's what we're hoping for with the slide deck. And we normally would have with our point of view.
For the record, last night's select board meeting's now been streamed 228 times on YouTube, and it was a mere 4 hours and 3 minutes long.
I have to say, having watched many a meeting streaming, 1 1/4 speed will get you through the meeting and be completely understandable. 1.5, even for my quick New Yorker ears, is too much, but 1 1/4 is a good speed.
Don't the voices get higher then?
It's, you do notice who speaks very slowly because they sound completely normal. We don't need that. Okay, so we'll keep working on that. Next item up is minutes for approval. Have you all had a chance to look at the minutes that I sent out for review?
Motion to approve all the minutes as amended.
Okay, the one outstanding amendment that I believe you can be comfortable with me doing is figuring out the attendance. I just don't have the exact attendance information accessible right now for the few meetings that had questions about it. Specifically, I don't remember if Isha was at one of the meetings. I need to track her down. If you all are comfortable with me doing that, and any other changes?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? All right, thank you very much. Liaison reports.
I have an unfortunate liaison report from the school building committee. There is something to be, there is some accounting to be solved at the end of all of this. I do not want to get into it too deeply because the final resolution has not been made, but there is a $400,000 question mark at the end of this project that needs to be solved. I'm just giving you the heads up that there's something there, whether or not it's a fire or if it's just a little bit of smoke, I'll report back in the near future, but there's a $400,000 accounting issue that needs to be solved, preferably by the entity that made the mistake, which wasn't us.
Yes, Steve, did you have one?
Yes, the health insurance trust will be dissolved in the near future. Both the town and the schools will move to MIA, which is the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Agency, which is a massive joint purchasing group, and it offers only Blue Cross products, so there'll be some transition. All of the active employees can move as of July 1st. The retirees, the retiree contract runs January 1st to January 1st. So the trust may exist for a stub period of 6 months until the retirees can also move to Maya. It'll save us some money. And I don't know, maybe a couple million. I haven't run the exact numbers. There will be an issue of run-out claims this year. So I'm not sure any real benefit will be seen versus the budget that we now have. The rates will be lower all year, but we will be on the hook for whatever run-out claims occur, probably 2 to 3 months after June 30th of this year. And in the meantime, we're going to have to pay the regular rates for the Maya premium. So there'll be a double counting period. Like I said, maybe only a couple months. But you never know. This time last year, I would have said we didn't have a problem with the HIT.
Anyone else? Okay. As previously mentioned, we have a liaison position open on the ADC. Greg is very excited about it, but I want to give an opportunity to any members with more seniority, because I know that this position has not been available for a long time. Is there anyone else who would like it?
If you have a volunteer, I'd go with it, Madam Chair.
Like I said, I just want to make sure. I know I was excited with it coming up, but I do not have the bandwidth
I agree.
right now.
So I think
All right,
it would be a
Greg?
perfect.
Thank you.
All right.
I think,
Careful.
Future meeting dates. As I mentioned, our next ALG meeting is this coming Monday, which leads to our next FinCom meeting being March 12th. Do we want to meet sooner than that in order to work on our slide deck for presentation? The vote is April 30th.
I would encourage us to, if not meet formally, then have a subcommittee.
We can't.
We can't?
No subcommittees.
No.
Subcommittees require formal minutes.
Oh, Lord.
And all of the,
Then I guess we're going to all have to drag our rear end in here then.
yes. A meeting of two people is a formal meeting and requires all of the OML,
Unless they happen to run into each other at a coffee shop.
which we know won't happen.
Who's buying?
Do we have a proposal for when we'd like to get together then?
Let's do it next Tuesday.
All right?
The 5th.
Okay, I will find a location for us. Yes, I can do that. Okay?
Would that also be at 7:30 or earlier?
It would be at 7:30.
7:30.
Do you have a preference for earlier?
I'm just asking. No, I don't have a preference.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, so 7:30, and hopefully it can be at ActonTV, if it cannot be here. Okay,
Wow, if we do it at ActonTV and we get our stuff together, we might be able to turn around, no, we send it to OMS.
all right, thank you very much. Do we have anything else anyone wants to discuss before we close out? No? Okay, Greg, could you please make a motion for us?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you very much, everyone.